I hope you all are doing good. In today's class, we are going to recapitulate and revise what we have already learnt about the phrases and clauses. So we are going to discuss the difference between the two, and then we will move ahead by learning more about the types of sentences and the clauses that we have already learnt. Let's start with the phrase. So what is a phrase? I hope till now you know that a phrase is made up of words, which probably does not make a complete sense. So that it makes a complete sense and stands alone, we need to put in some more words to it. Here on the board you can see I've written a few examples of phrases. These are just a group of words, okay? They do not have a subject, they do not have a verb. For example, in the east, at my door, of blue color. Here are a few examples. Obviously, when we want to make frame a sentence out of it, we have to add a subject and a predicate to it. Coming on to the clauses, I have written here a few examples of clauses. Now, what are clauses? Clauses again are a group of words, but the difference between the two, the major difference is clauses have a complete thought, they make a complete sentence, they stand alone. They have a subject, they have a verb, they make a complete sense. Okay, it is a complete sentence and it is a part of a large sentence, of a complex sentence. So if you pick out the clause from the whole complex sentence, it will stand alone. It will have a complete sense of its own. Alright? For example, she is the girl whom I met yesterday. So here, whom I met yesterday stands alone. It has a complete sense of its own. It has a subject. It has a verb. Alright? Look at the next sentence. I told Raj that I will meet him tomorrow. Again, that I will meet him tomorrow is a clause where I is the subject and again meet is the verb here. So if we separate it from the complex sentence, it will stand alone. It has a meaning of its own. Now I don't know how he could do it. How he could do it again is a clause. So we can see that though they are a group of words, the phrase and the clause, but obviously a clause is a complete sentence, whereas phrase is just a group of words. Now we will learn about the types of sentences, and we will also discuss about the types of clauses that I have already shared videos of, the adjective clause and the noun clause. Alright children, so we'll move ahead now.
Adjective clauses almost always come right after the nouns they modify or change. Let us see a few examples here. There is the mountain that we are going to. In this sentence, that we are going to climb is the adjective clause as it tells us about the mountain noun here in this sentence. Next example, my blue tennis shoes, which used to be my mom's, were under the bed. Here in this sentence, children, which used to be my mom's is the adjective clause here as it tells us about the noun shoes. In the third sentence, Daniel, who was late again today, sits next to me in English class. So here we are talking about noun Daniel, who was late again today. So in this sentence, the adjective clause you can identify is who was late again today. Now the question arises as to how you will identify an adjective or relative clause. An adjective clause, also called an adjectival or relative clause, will meet three requirements. First, it will contain a subject and a verb. Next, It would tell us something about the noun. And last, it will begin with a relative pronoun, who, whom, whose, that or which, or relative adverb, when, where or why. Talking about the relative pronoun and relative adverb, children, an adjective clause starts with a relative pronoun or relative adverb. These are basically conjunctions of an adjective clause. Some of them could be a subject of the clause also. Let us see. That, which, who can be subject and conjunction of an adjective clause, whereas whom, whose, when, where, and why are only connectors and not the subject of a relative clause. Now, adjective clause or relative clause are of two types, defining and modifying. Defining means it points out to the noun. The sentences which are a defining adjective clause do not have comma. For example, the man who lives next door is a doctor. This is a defining adjective clause. It does not have any commas in it. Whereas the modifying adjective clause, modify means to change, right? So modifying adjective clause gives us extra information about the noun. Therefore, it contains comma. For example, Dr. Smith, comma, who lives next door, comma, is a retired surgeon. Why? Because now here the adjective clause who lives next door is giving us some more information about Dr. Smith, who lives next door, is a retired surgeon, is the extra information about Dr. Smith. So children, this was the lesson on adjective clause. Remember that adjective clause starts with that, which, who, whom, whose, when, where, and why. A noun clause is a dependent clause that takes the place of any noun in the sentence, whether they are subjects, objects, or subject complements. For example, no one knew where we were headed. In this, the noun clause appears as the object of the sentence, where we were headed. She asked whether we should go. Again, in the noun clause, here is whether we should go. Do you know when you are leaving? When you are leaving is the noun clause here. The question is whether he can do the work or not. Here again, whether he can do is the subject. I don't know if it is raining. If it is raining is the noun clause in this sentence. How can you spot a noun clause in a sentence? Well, these are the following connectors with which you can easily spot a noun clause in a sentence. Most of you use these connectors to form a noun clause. Most of the time, that in a noun clause is not used but assumed as used in a sentence. So we can say that in a noun clause, sometimes in few sentences, we omit using that as the connector. Moving on, let us learn about 5 functions of noun clauses. Noun clause can be used as the subject of a sentence. It can function as the subject of an independent clause. For example, what he says is quite true. In this sentence, the noun clause appears as the subject of the sentence. That he will come back is certain. Again, the noun clause here is the subject of the sentence. The second function is as the direct object. A noun clause can work as the direct object of the verb in the independent clause. Do you know when the train will come? When the train will come is the direct object. He thinks that she will never fail. That she will never fail is the object of the independent clause. Moving on to the third function, which is the object of the preposition. Other times, noun clauses can act as the object of a preposition in the independent clause. For example, I cannot depend on what he says. What he says is the noun clause, which is the object of the preposition on. In the next sentence, I object to what he says. What he says is the noun clause, and the preposition is to. The next function of the noun clause is as the subject complement. Noun clauses can act as subject complement or nouns that follow linking verbs. For example, life is what we make it. The linking verb is. It seems that she will top the list of successful candidates. Here, it seems is the linking verb that she will top the list of successful candidates. In this sentence, that she will top the list of successful candidates is the noun clause. The fifth function of the noun clause is in apposition or equal to a noun or a pronoun, it. For example, it is clear that he was innocent. It is the pronoun here, which is equal to the noun clause that he was innocent. The news that he is alive is true. Now here the noun clause is that he is alive is true. So we can easily identify between the noun clause and the adjective clause if we look at the table given here. Noun clause is a dependent clause that functions as a noun. Adjective clause is an adjective clause that functions as an adjective. Noun clause functions as a noun. It can act as the subject, object, and subject complement, whereas adjective clause functions as an adjective and modifies the noun. Noun clauses are not written with commas, but adjective clauses are sometimes set off by commas. Therefore, we see, children, that there is a difference between the adjective clause and the noun clause. I hope you will be able to identify the noun clause and the adjective clause and would learn the difference between the independent and the dependent clauses.